What's up, guys? Adam back with RVA Returners. So now we're getting into our ice review for Opus 5. So talk about some cool cards. Ice got seemed to get a pretty good amount of support. So I'm joined today with Austin, a local Richmond ice player. Pretty much all he plays is ice, so thought it would make sense to get him on here.
That's the only thing I've ever cared about since Opus One. So,
All right, so let's kick it off with our first card. So I'm not even really sure how to pronounce Aloe Die, I guess is how you say this guy.
Aloe Die Day,
Yeah, so basically
two-headed
for
monster.
yeah, for one ice, he's a monster. Cost four. For one ice, you can turn him into a forward for 8,000 power, and then essentially he's Genesis and Lock. Like when he does damage, you have to discard from your hand.
Exactly.
So what do you think about this guy?
I think he's interesting. It gives Ice, a bigger body. You're most likely hoping he's going to be a 9K with Duke on the field. Um, and like, but again, you're looking at it as a 5-drop, 8K, 9K at best. That's going to discard. And I think you'd rather be in that 4-drop slot, be looking at Genesis, or potentially a Vayne to kind of dull someone's board. I know there's some kind of like ice water builds, so maybe there might be like a Gal monster build that this could kind of go into to do some of that synergy. I just haven't really seen like a spot that he fits into just because of his casting costs. Maybe if he was a 3-drop monster that had one and could become an 8K, I think that'd be a lot more powerful. But it's just, I think it's kind of hard to see him in the current spot that he's at and really making an impact in current builds.
For sure, I agree. I think they're because you have Lock and Genesis and they do similar things and they are you don't have to pay for them every turn. It's definitely relevant. I do think because he's harder to deal with and he is an 8K instead of those 7K bodies, he might see a little bit of play. Also, he is a 13 character, I believe, so could have some synergy with like some Ice Lightning going on. I think
Yeah,
he's definitely like on the borderline. I think he could see play though.
yeah, I think you'll see some interesting decks trying to run him and kind of build around him. I think it has potential, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So next card's gonna be the 3-cost Vayne. He's a 6K forward. He has EX Burst. So when he enters the field, you can search for a card named Larsa and add it to your hand.
This is an interesting card. I've been kind of toying around with a Lightning Water 12 build, which I think this might be like potentially put into for like the EX burst factor. I think the big problem is that for this Vayne to be valuable, you have to be then running Larsa, and being that Larsa doesn't have any EX bursts and is in water, you really don't have a lot of synergy there. So it could be you might see like an extra copy or two for Opus 2 Legendary Vayne's special ability. I don't think there's a lot of water ice builds right now that you want that Larsa in potentially, because the forward Larsa is just going to be another Minwu, and the backup Larsa is some card draw, but I don't really think that's going to be really where you want to be in like an water ice X build deck. So I don't know. I'm really kind of torn on it. I think it could be fun, but I haven't really seen where it comes together yet.
Yeah, I think competitively this card isn't going to see much play at all. I think he's very limited. It's nice that he has burst, and essentially if you think about getting the card, he's a 1-drop 6K basically because you're getting a card from it, which is
Exactly.
which is kind of nice, but he's very limited. I feel like you're pretty much pushing yourself to work to using water ice at that point. Um, so I don't really, and his name is Vayne, so you can't play the other Vayne when you play this guy. So
Exactly.
that just
And I
feels
think
bad.
you'd rather have like the Mog, what, because the water, the forward is what, a 3-drop as well, the 4K one.
Which one is that?
It's a from Opus 4. It was a Mog that lets you tap and draw a card or draw two
Oh,
cards.
yep, that's Mog 6. Yep.
So yeah, so I think in that spot you'd rather have them there than trying to go search for a card that's only kind of situational. So I think that spot is already kind of in a weird mix in what the ice water build would be too. So
Yeah. So yeah, I don't. For me, competitively, I don't think this guy sees much play. So
yeah.
next up we have Yune. She's a 4-drop 7K, so tad under curve. When she enters the field dull, she doesn't activate during your active phase. But when she enters the field, you get to choose a forward an opponent controls, and as long as she's on the field, that opponent also does not get to activate, or that forward doesn't get to activate during their active phase, and it dulls it immediately. So.
Yeah. So I really like the mechanic of kind of basically being able to lock something out permanently with another one of your cards. I think this is kind of currently more of like a sealed card. Um, Only because it's like an extra removal in ice that you may not see in like a sealed environment. I think in constructed, you might see like a copy of it to kind of lock something down permanently. It does that same that the Opus 2 Vein effect in a sense to dull something, but it can be anything as opposed to just 5 cost. And I don't know. I think it's really cool to see that kind of concept and mechanic being built in to FFTCG because it's not something we've seen to just take something basically away until it goes away. And then again, you've kind of got some wind ice concepts that might be starting to pop up that could really like a wind ice unblockable deck to throw a Shellk in, get some early hate out there on the board, and then be able to lock down some of their bigger guys later on. I think that could be a really interesting build. So I'm tempted to build around one of those kind of style decks.
Yeah, I think she's very interesting. I like the design of the card a lot. My issue is like with Vayne, like you're not targeting anything, so the fact that you can hit multiple things with Vayne is nice. Vayne's also a bigger body, and he's
Yeah.
still doing other things while he's out. You also have Genesis in this slot, which is, I mean,
Yeah.
that guy's
You're
insane.
really clogged in that 4-drop spot in
Yeah,
ice.
I think that's almost every element, to be honest, the more I think about it. But like I said, I think she's a really cool design. I think in very like specific decks, maybe she has some use. But competitively, I'm not sure. I don't think she sees too much play.
Yeah, I mean, she might be a one of in certain decks.
Yeah, I mean, she's a devout
Removal.
target. That's one thing.
Yeah,
She's a devout target.
definitely.
So we'll go to the next card. So 2 cost Arcanus. He's a backup for 1 ice and 1 colorless. You dull him. Select a number. All forwards that cost that number can't attack this turn.
Who boy, this card I am super super excited about a full foil collection really really soon. Um, I think to be able to kind of have that, I don't know, that's a super strong ability to me. Again, with you got standard or the standard units deck and like water wind, being able to kind of lock down all those knights that give you super problems, or also being able to like get around rangers. So basically being able to dull them on the attack step, which ice has a huge problem with dealing with rangers since you can't target it. That's a really powerful ability. And again, a lot of times, 4-drops are usually going to kind of be clogging up the board. It blocks that down. This card, I think, should be a 2 of, if not a 3 of, in most ice decks. I definitely see it being a 2 of just for the sheer utility of it. Granted, it's only on the attack, but still, I think that really kind of frees up stuff on your side. So,
Yeah, I think this is it's a defensive ice card for sure. So
oh,
like
yeah.
in the more like discard heavy decks, I don't know if you see this card, but it's a 2 cost backup. So like I think pretty much almost any 2 cost backup is pretty playable as long as it
Yeah.
has some kind of ability that's usable. And this is reusable every turn, which is nice. All right, so let's go on to the next card, which is a card I think a lot of people are looking at. So we have a 6 cost Orphan. He's a 9K forward, so pretty big, which isn't very like ice doesn't get that a lot. When he enters the field, you choose up to 2 forwards your opponent controls. You dull him. If you control 5 or more ice characters, freeze them also. So he includes himself, which is really nice. And when he attacks, you get to choose a forward opponent control and freeze it. What do you think about this one?
So, I think it's really below average, and you shouldn't get it. I This card, I think, is just flat out an auto include in any ice deck. It's a great curve topper, right off the bat. When you're looking at it, you've got a 9K, which ice really doesn't have a lot of. And then when you're kind of looking at the effects, the way I've been looking at it is honestly like this guy ends up being a 2K, or excuse me, a 2-drop 9K, because you get the Opus 3 Shiva effect when he enters of dulling characters, right? So now you're looking at he's a 4-drop 9K that just Shiva'd. And then if you control 5 ice characters, again, including himself, that shouldn't be too super hard to do if you kind of build a board state out. Now you're getting to play basically the Jill Bot backup and freeze 2 characters as well. So just the utility of what he brings when he comes in, that can be super, super crippling to any opponent. And then again, most likely having Duke on the field, he's now a 10K in ice and being able to freeze something when you attack. So if you've got a snow on the board, being able to dull one of their big things in and then attacking with him and freeze it, or Shiva on top of it. I mean, there's just so much utility in this card that I think you have to play at least 2 in it, kind of the top, the end of your forwards. It's so strong. I think luckily he's a 13 character.
He is a 13 character.
So I don't think you can tutor him yet, which is good for other players.
Oh,
but
you can't. Yeah, you have Mulk 13 too.
Oh yeah, you can. I forgot about that. I was trying to look up tutors. So yeah, so the fact that you can tutor him as well, that just adds so many more lines to this card. I think this might be one of, and aside from one other ice card that we're going to talk about later, I think this is probably one of the best cards in the set just in general, but definitely one of the top 2 or 3 ice cards that they printed.
Yeah, I think this card is absolutely insane. I think he's like a finisher that ice probably didn't need, but now they have.
Yeah, exactly.
I play tested a little bit before the set came out, like online and stuff, and every time this guy hit the board, I basically just won in like the next 2 turns. It's like pretty insane. It's not hard at all to get to 5 ice characters, like 3 backups and 1 forward and this guy, and that's it.
Yeah. When you have that 6 engine online, it's really easy to kind of tutor all that up, and having 5 characters, that's going to be super super easy when you're looking at it. So.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think this is an auto 2 of in like almost any ice deck for sure.
Definitely.
So go to the next card. It's another backup 2-cost Scholar. For 1 ice and tap and put him in the break zone, you get to choose 1 ice forward of cost 3 or less that's in the break zone and add it to your hand.
So yeah, this I think this is, I don't know if people have been looking at it. I think it's super super strong. Basically now you have a mini devout in ice, so now you have 2 ways of recursion. You can basically use Locke's special ability upwards of 5 times in a match, which was pretty broken. Again, you can grab back another Renoa if you've already devouted for something else. You can grab back a Shulk or a Sarah. So, I mean, there's a lot of different lines that this card falls into. It's a 2-drop backup, which is pretty insane. Any 2-drop backup usually you're going to play, but anything that can then give you some recursion for your targets that you've already pitched or for something in a pinch. I mean, it's super, super strong. I definitely think you'll see probably 2 copies in some decks, depending on which way they're running. You'll see at least 1 copy. I would almost guarantee it. Anytime you have recursion, I think that's just super, super strong in any element. So,
yeah, to me, I read this card and it's 1 ice tap, put him in the break zone, get locked back to your hand. Like that's how I read it.
That's what it is.
So yeah, like barrage dives for days, basically, which I think is crazy. And he costs 2, and he breaks himself to make room for other things. The one thing to note is you're really not running this outside of mono ice, really, because it's literally just the ice forwards. But yeah, again, Renoa's another big one that you can get back. So now you can devout your 4-drop targets, and you can use this guy to get maybe your 3 drops or lower.
Exactly. It opens up those lines a lot to be able to know their stuff and still keep bigger threats in the break zone for devouts and whatnot too. So.
Yep. Yeah, I think this definitely sees play for sure. So next card we have is 3-cost Edward. He's another backup. When he enters the field, your opponent discards a card from their hand, and then he has a special, which is just special tap to choose a summon and cancel its effect.
So I definitely like this card. I think it has potential. I think the weird thing about him is, though, that to really be effective with him, you want to run multiple copies, and you don't really want to be clogging up your 3-drop backup spot, because that's usually where Duke lives, like if you're in a mono ice thing. And if you're going to be running the discard, you're probably going to be in mono ice anyway. So, I do think the being able to choose 1 summon and cancel back super, super strong. But again, being that you also have to discard, you may not want to be there. I think it has utility. I think it's better than the other 3-drop Edward. Even though that can continuously make someone discard. But I think his special ability really kind of puts him over the top as far as that. He might see some constructed play in the mono ice like discard decks, but I don't think he's got enough legs on him right now to really make a splash. But I mean, who knows? We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think people will try this card, and I think they might slowly figure out that it's not as good as they might think. But it's not.
Yeah.
I don't think he's terrible. And I
No,
think,
not at all.
yeah, there's definitely merit to playing him in like those discard style decks. And if you get a special off, it feels really good. I will
Yeah, I
say
mean, if
that.
forget someone bouncing your forwards because you
Yeah,
said no, but
yeah, where you cancel that nine cost Raiden or Bahamut or something.
yeah.
Yeah, that's like game ending basically. All right, so next card we have is Glassy Labolas, which I'm just gonna call Doom Train. Uh,
It is Doom Train.
so he's one of these select 2 of 4 cards. So basically, his 4 options are discard 1 card, choose a forward, dull it, choose a forward, freeze it, and choose 1 dull forward and deal it 7,000 damage.
I was so excited when I first saw this card come out. I was actually coming back from the event in Charlotte that was hosted by ARG, the summer series down there, and I was like going crazy over the fact that they gave me Doom Train and they called him the wrong name. I think it's really awesome that we're getting these command style cards to be able to choose, different modes. The thing that I think is kind of a drawback, I think, and we've discussed this, is that if you kind of do the options in sequence.
Mhm.
So if one of those fizzles, the whole thing fizzles, which I think kind of puts all of those modal things in a interesting area. But it has so much utility. I definitely think you have to try to find room for a copy or two, depending on the kind of the build you're doing. Again, being able to potentially blow something up for 7K, or just dull and freeze something, or again rip that last card out of someone's hand. It feels really good, and I definitely think it's going to see a fair amount of play, but also in a lot of different builds, because it's, I think you can find ways to make this work in a lot of different situations that you didn't have the access to before, like in a fire ice build. So worry about discarding, now you can, and dull something on top of it. I don't know. I think it's going to see a lot of play, truthfully.
I agree. I actually see it as more of a defensive card too. Like this can shut down an Al Cid too. So I don't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what you can do now is if they play Al Cid, you're just like, I'll dull my guy and make you discard a card. And to me, that seems really strong to counter that play. So I like it for that reason. One thing to note is because they both go on the stack and happen at the same time, you cannot dull and deal 7K to something.
Yeah.
You have the 7K has to target an already dull forward. And then, like you said earlier, because if one fizzles, they both fizzle. So for some reason, a forward or becomes untargetable, or the dull forward you chose becomes active, then it will fizzle both. So if you chose like discard a card and deal dull forward 7,000, and they somehow activated their forward, they actually wouldn't have to pitch the card. So that can be really relevant, and that's the case with all these summons. But I do like this one a lot. I think this actually might be one of the best ones.
I would agree in the long run, looking at all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do like it. I do think Ice's summon package is getting a little tight though, but I do like this card a lot.
There's a lot that you're fighting over, definitely, needless to say. So
Yeah. So next card is Gumba. He's a 2-cost backup, and when he's put into the field or from the field into the break zone, you can search your deck for a card named Gumba and play it onto the field duel.
So with this, it's definitely interesting. It's a 2-drop backup, which is always good, and it has the potential to replace itself. So I think you're going to be seeing this in either like Ice Lightning decks with Lulu to be able to blow stuff, their forwards up, or also like an Ice Earth for the Opus 1 deleted. You can blow this guy up, bring in a 9K for basically 2 CP, and still have your backup there. So I think that's a really unique build. Being that we don't have any other Gumbas right now, maybe we'll see some more in future sets that maybe you can there'll be a Gumba 4 that'll do something interesting. So for right now, I think it's a really niche. It goes into very specific style decks. So I don't know. We'll kind of see where it goes. I think it has potential, but I don't think it's, again, unless it's in those 2 very specific kind of decks, I don't think you'll see a bunch of it in play.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into this card because I 100% agree with basically what you just said. I think those 2 builds are the builds that would look at it. I think the only other card you didn't mention that I could see some synergy with is Mystic, the one that KOs backups to buff itself. But again, then a lot of times you see that in other decks, and now you're forced to play Ice Earth with it. And Ice Earth already has so many better cards, I think, than running that. So I think it's interesting, but I don't think it sees much competitive play.
Yeah.
Next card we have is Gesper. He's a 2-cost monster. Tap. Each player discards 1 card from his or her hand. You can only use this ability during your turn.
I don't think this guy sees a lot. Maybe I'm missing something, but from looking at it, I think this is much more kind of a limited include than a constructed include, personally.
Yeah, I'm not super sold on it. It is kind of nice that like maybe you can like pitch your hand out and kind of get rid of the negative aspect of it. Maybe just you're tapping every turn to force them to discard one card.
Yeah,
And it is interesting to note that with this guy, you can play Sit All Stain and like pitch your hand to play Sit All Stain with them having one card in their hand, put his ability on the stack and force him to pitch, kind of things like
true.
that. I think it's going to be hard for him to find a spot for sure. And there's another monster coming up that I think this card is probably better than that monster, but we haven't talked about it yet.
Yeah.
But it is a similar costed monster, so. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how much play this sees, but I could see the uses for it for sure.
Yeah.
Next card is 3-cost Conjurer, standard unit. When he enters the field, you can choose a standard unit from your break zone and add it to your hand.
Anytime, and I'll say this multiple times, anytime that you can tutor for something or grab something back from the break zone, that's already a ton of value, because you're basically just casting this as a 1-cost backup in a sense, which is always good. Being that there's so many standard units, this finds itself in a lot of different builds. You've got the Deep Ground Soldiers, you've got the SciComm Soldiers, you've got WRO. I mean, this could find its way into potentially some other like Lena units. So you could see like a Water Ice standard unit deck. I don't know. It has a ton of utility. You can pull back a lot of stuff with it. It's just kind of going to be how people want to build around that, and if we can make those decks a lot more viable, because obviously your initial reactions are, or at least for me, were Deep Ground and WRO and SciComm. So there's a lot of good cards already in those kind of element builds. So if it sees some play, but I definitely think it's going to be jammed into a lot of decks to see if it can get abused. So
Yeah, I think for me, it's like if this thing was water, I think it'd be busted.
yeah.
But the fact that it's on ice kind of keeps it in check a little bit. They did add some new standard units that we'll talk about later that I think are pretty good in ice.
Yeah.
Two of them specifically. So maybe some kind of ice X standard unit build might be good. And like you said, you already have the other ice standard units that already exist, the 7 guys, I think.
Yeah.
So like they're pretty decent. Also to note, this can pull back backups, standard unit backups. That is something that it can do. So it can get you back those bards that you're breaking, and the scholar from before. It can also grab that. So then you can get another scholar, get another lock. Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Keep the value train running.
So the next card we have is the last legendary for ice. It's the Emperor. When he enters the field, you can pay an additional 1 colorless. If you do, your opponent discards a card from their hand. When your opponent draws a card outside of the draw phase, choose one for opponent's control, dull it, and freeze it.
So I was really excited about this card initially, and then I was kind of taken back, and now I'm kind of fancy on it. And basically, you're getting a 4-drop 7K that is then going to discard. So it's a playful spot for Genesis and Lock. It kind of meshes kind of in there with both of them. As of right now, I think the thing that might be holding this card back is the fact that when they draw outside of their draw phase, there's not a lot of stuff that's going to make them draw cards that you could force. So you're kind of looking at stuff like, maybe Poo Poo or Fairy or Moogle or stuff like that. They're going to sure cards to make that dull effect go in, or the dull and freeze, excuse me. He is tutorable from the Opus 1 Emperor, but I don't know how much you're going to kind of be playing around with that. I think the Opus 4 Emperor is just better. He's going to get stronger as more sets come out, though.
Yeah, I don't think he's bad or anything. My thing is, yeah, you could pay the extra 1, but it's not really like he's a 4-drop, because you have to pay 3 and then 1. That's my biggest thing. So
True.
you can't really pitch 2 cards to play him and force a discard, because you have to actually pay the mana separately.
Yep.
He screams like if sideboard existed, I think he'd be good. Like if you knew you were running into something that drew a lot of cards, you would definitely just dump this guy in to force them to discard more cards as they're drawing.
Definitely.
Or not discard, excuse me, dulling and freezing a bunch of their stuff.
Yeah.
So he's a bit of a tech card. Maybe if like those decks become popular, he might see play, but I don't really see him seeing too terribly much play. Now maybe as more sets come out, he could definitely get a lot better for sure.
Yeah.
So the next card we have is 5 cost forward Zed, I guess is how you pronounce it.
Zide,
Zed,
something.
yeah, something like that. He's an 11 character. When he's dealt damage by a character, that character's controller discards the card from their hand, and then you can pay 1 ice, and he gains 1,000 power till end of turn.
This guy's a mono ice superstar, in my opinion. Again, being that you got a 9K body, granted, still, most of the other 9Ks that you see in ice are going to be 5. With Sid Alstein, Orphan's going to be 6, but just printed cost of 9, and being able to just whenever he's dealt damage by a character, that character's controller discards. That's super strong. He's super defensive, but he can also be really offensive. You can get damage through and then be able to dull if they don't decide to block, or if they do decide to block, he's pitching it. And the fact that you can give him more power with just 1 ice, CP is really strong. I'm definitely looking at throwing him in some builds because I think he can really kind of control a battlefield, even if you just want to use him defensively. I think this guy is going to see a fair amount of play, kind of in across the board in builds.
Yeah, I see this as more like a really good defensive ice card. Kind of the opposite of Orphan. I think Orphan's more offensive than this guy. I do think he gets a little bit overshadowed by Orphan just because right now the popular mono ice decks tend to be more aggressive discardy build. But if it becomes more control, I think this guy is really insane. Like the fact that you just pump 1 ice to keep pumping him over your stuff, and even if they block him or he blocks, they're still discarding a card. You can't get too cheeky with him though because the way he's worded, like you can't like ping him and then force your opponent to discard.
That was going to be the hope that you could do that, but
so you can't really get away with that. But I think he's like a nice big body for ice that ice didn't have before this set, and now they have 2. So
definitely
pretty interesting card. I think he definitely sees play for sure. So next we have the 3 cost Arithmetician. So this is a forward version of Arithmetician. I think the first one. Standard unit. Tap, select 1 number, dull all forwards of that cost. You can only use this ability during your turn.
It's got a lot of utility. I think I'd rather see it in a backup, but I think that would make it too broken if it was just a backup. But again, we've already kind of seen that there is going to be some, like with Conjurer, you could potentially pull it back from your, and there's no extra cost to doing that dulling. So again, on your turn, you just dull out whatever is the biggest problem on their board, and it's all of that number. So any of those like blanket effects are always really good. And you're only losing, kind of 1 forward on it. So I think it makes for some really interesting board states, and people have to really think about the numbers that they're putting out there. Again, the kind of that going on that like standard unit deck, this really kind of messes with that one a lot. I definitely think it's going to see play. The 3-drop spot is kind of tough right now because you're competing with Locke, you're competing with Renoa. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see where it sees some gets in those builds. But I definitely think it has a lot of utility in what you could be building around it.
Yeah, I think if this was a backup, it would be too good, to be honest.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
No EX burst on it, but
yeah, and the fact that it's also limited, you have to use it on your turn. So really, you're just using this kind of either to swing through or maybe dull some extra. Like maybe you got that Jill and their forwards are ready, but now you can dull them to get extra value out of your Jill by playing it. I mean, those are the kind of the uses I see, and then it is a standard unit, so you can get it back with that Conjurer. I think it's going to be hard for it to see play, but maybe in a certain like new build, this might see some play for sure. So the next one we have is a 4-cost backup. It's Sid Reigns, EX Burst. When he enters the field, choose 1 dull forward opponent controls and deal it 7,000 damage.
So it's great to be able to blow stuff up in ice. I wish it was 8K because then again you could get rid of a lot of the main threats that you're going to see. Of course, ice can't get everything. It is an EX burst, so that's really powerful to just kind of catch someone off guard. They swing in with a smaller forward, and you blow it up with that. Being that it's a 4-drop backup, you're fighting with like devout spots and ice, or kind of depending what you're looking at, and it has to be a dull forward. So again, that's more heavily influenced ice builds and kind of other things. I think it'll definitely see some play. I think I personally like the other Sid Reigns better just because you can discard a card after the damage is dealt, and you're probably going to be pinging extra damage on dull forwards. So it's going to be interesting to see how these two cards kind of play together once those builds really start happening.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see it. I wish this guy cost 3, honestly. Like, I think 3 would be the right number for the 7,000 on the backup.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe at that point it maybe not doesn't have the EX verse, and I guess that's why it's costed at 4. I do think the issue is, again, yeah, with the other Sid range exists, so I think the other Sid range are just more powerful than this card in the right builds. So I don't think this card is bad, but I don't think it sees too much play, to be honest.
Yeah.
Next up, we have a 2-cost forward, Thaumaturge. When it enters the field, your opponent discards a card from their hand, and if your opponent has 2 or less cards in their hand, it gets plus 4,000 power, and its power is a 1,000.
So with this card, you're kind of getting a mix of Argath from Opus 1 and then the Opus 3 Zidane. It's getting the buff if they have less cards in hand, but you're also not getting the ability of Zidane to be able to like choose which card it is. So it's interesting. Again, a 2-drop potential 5K is something. I just don't think it's going to see a lot of constructed play. There's better cards built around it. It is a standard unit, so maybe there's going to be, again, an ice standard unit deck might be appearing, so that could be a thing. It is, I don't know, we'll kind of see how it goes, but I don't think this is going to see a ton of play.
Yeah, I have seen a lot of people messing with this card, so just because I guess how cheap it is. My thing is, too, I like the Argath just better, honestly, because Argath costs 2 as well, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so
granted, Argath is only a 3K, but it's not a situational to have them discard and have less cards. So
yeah, so I mean, maybe this is better than Argath. Then maybe I'm just not thinking about it. I think this is like a borderline card again. Like maybe you could see play if you're going like full heavy discard because it's just a cheap way to get cards out of your opponent's hand. And I mean, it can be a 5K, and like you said, recursion with the standard unit can be a thing for sure. I'm not super sold on this card, but I wouldn't be surprised if this saw play. So, next card we have is the new 4-cost Snow. He's a 7K power. When he enters the field, you can pay X. If you do, you can search your deck for 1 card named Lightning of cost X or less and play it onto the field.
So, initially having this in the pre-release and being able to tutor your 2-drop Hasty, awesome. That felt really good. Obviously, it kind of forces you into an Ice Lightning build because you're searching for a Lightning. So you're kind of already accounting for the cards that you're going to have there. It is a 4-drop, so you can hit it with Devout, which is interesting because you can bring it in and then pay your cost on it. So maybe you set up those turns to be able to then pay 6 to bring in one of the big Lightnings, or the 5-drop Lightning to then go tutor an Odin, put that back on your top of your deck. He's a 7K, so I don't know, he's not going to ever be really huge. So I don't think you're going to be trading with him a lot. Again, being that you can only search for a Lightning and you still have to pay the cost on it, you really kind of have to sequence it a lot. I think it might see some play. I think people might try to build around that deck. But I don't know. I think the Opus 1 Snow is better in like an ice world that you're looking for. But I mean, who knows? I think this is something that people will build around, and maybe we'll see something come from it.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it already. Like, I think this is only good in a very particular build of Ice Lightning, which is like the 13 build. I do think, like, if you have the mana and you could pay 4 for this guy and then 5 for the Legendary Lightning and immediately get value for it, that could be something. But again, you're paying 9, so if you're paying 9, you better be doing something really good.
I'd rather be raiding in than that, but
yeah. So I don't think he sees too much play, but I'm sure some people will mess with him, especially if you're trying to build some kind of 13 heavy deck.
Yeah, definitely.
So the next card we have is Trickster. He's a 3-cost forward, standard unit, 7K. He does not receive damage from forwards that have haste and first strike.
So I think this is an icy answer to a decent amount of cards that are kind of existing. I do like that he kind of has this nice little trickster tech of haste or first strike not affecting him. So that's really, really cool. And you can kind of buff him. So if, they've got a first strike 8K or something like that, with Duke on the field, you can kind of play around some stuff. It's definitely an interesting card. He's also a standard unit. So we're seeing a lot of this kind of standard unit synergy. I'm interested to see what kind of build he goes in. I think people will be kind of building around him. But I don't know if there's enough hate or enough build around for haste and first strike for him to be like auto includes. But it definitely, I think this is kind of one of those sideboard cards that we talked about earlier. Like if this would be something you could potentially add in, but I don't think it sees spots in like main decks.
Yep. Again, yeah, I think this would be an insane sideboard card if sideboards existed in this game. There are a couple cool interactions to note with this guy, actually. So it's not just combat damage; it's all damage. So any ability that a first strike or haste card also has, this guy does not receive damage from that card. And also, say a first strike forward party attacks with another forward, even though it loses the first strike element when it party attacks, because the printed on the card is still first strike, Trickster still does not receive damage from that card.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. So, say you have like two 7Ks attacking this guy, or a 6K and a 7K, and the 7K has first strike. Trickster will only take 6,000 damage. So it has some interesting, really cool interactions. And maybe like if your local meta or something is really hasty or something, this could be like a cool tech card. But as far as like competitively, I think he's going to be hard to find slots. But I do really like this card. And if standard like ice standard unit something becomes playable, this guy definitely goes in there for sure.
Oh yeah, certainly at that point.
So our next card is 4-cost backup Hurdy. He's a Moogle. When he enters the field, you can search for one card named Mont Blanc and add it to your hand.
So I'm not gonna lie. I wish this was an EX burst for 4. But again, you're gonna be in that fire ice build most likely, or you're gonna be trying to do like a 5-color Moogle deck. And I think that's just a little too ambitious and too greedy right now. Truthfully. I don't know. This is one of the cards. It can do a thing, but I don't really know where I'm building around this card. Truthfully.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it had burst really bad too. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I think this card kind of sucks right now.
Better you than me.
I mean, like, yeah, if you're going like full Moogle build and you're trying to get like 3 or 4 color Moogles, I think maybe this guy goes in there. But like, I don't see that as a competitive deck right now.
Yeah.
I do like the whole like interesting little infinite combo thing that people found out in the last set, but even that wasn't very consistent enough to make its way into a like actual competitive deck. Yeah. So the more Moogles they print, the more I want to look back into that deck. But I feel like this guy is already so limited in what he searches out, and he doesn't have a burst, and he costs 4. It's like, yeah. I don't think this card's very good, and I don't think it's gonna see any play right now.
Nope.
So the next card's a pretty spicy one. It's the new one of the other new ice summons. Yeah, so it's a 1-cost summon, Mateus the Corrupt, and you choose one blocking forward and break it.
Need we say anything else? I think the card speaks for itself. It's a 1-cost break. Granted, you have to target, so anything that can't be targeted or chosen by that kind of sucks. But now every single ice card is a huge bluff and a gamble for people to block. So you can be getting through damage with small forwards that otherwise people would chump because they're worried about you having the Mateus. And it might even be something where people don't even run it just to bluff it. This gave ice so much more potential to not have to worry about, losing a Genesis or losing a lock, or any of those power cards that you want to keep on the battlefield. This card is an auto include. If you're not running 2 or 3 of in an ice build, I think you're wrong. I think this card is just so super strong for 1 ice. I mean, this card's bonkers. It's probably the best ice card in the set.
Yeah, I think this card's really dumb. The fact that now like you play your Sid Reigns and now he's like a 2-cost 5K and you're scared to block him.
Yeah,
is insane. And like even if you bluff it and you block my 2-cost 5K, like okay, And then there is some counterplay to this to note. So if you do destroy the attacking forward, you are not considered blocking anymore. So that does get around this card. But however, I'm paying 1 mana, and you're probably spending at least 3 to 4 mana to kill my thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
so you're still losing out on this trade.
yeah, so yeah, even with the CP comparison, you're still losing out. Yeah, I do lose my forward usually in that case. But now the fact that like Ice's big drawback was the fact that their kind of forwards, their power forwards were understated,
Yep.
and now you're afraid to even block those guys. And like an early one of these can really set you back if you decide to block, and they do have it
Yep.
for 1 mana. And now yeah, it's gonna be rough. I think, like you said, I think you definitely include at least 2 of these in almost any ice deck. And yeah, I think you're insane if you don't think that, to be honest.
Yeah.
And like just the bluff factor of this card, I think is crazy. Now you have to think twice about blocking anything. I'm just a lot of times I think people are just gonna start swinging even if they don't have it and force people to think about it. And I think that's crazy as well.
It's too many mind games in ice now.
Yeah. So next up we have 1 cost forward Barnabas. At the beginning of your main phase 1, if you don't control a card named Lugay, you can dull him. And when a card named Lugay enters the field, you activate him. And he's a 9k. So he's a 1 cost 9k.
So yeah, that theoretically should be super. I think there's going to be ways to abuse this. Obviously, you want to have that Lugay to be able to make him active and swing with them. And we'll talk about Lugay a little bit later. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what people build around it. This could be a really interesting include in like an iced wind deck because it is only 1 CP. You can just have him out on the field, kind of waiting, and then activate him with wind in a certain way. So that could be interesting. Again, I think this is going to be something where people have to really tech and build around. So maybe it's really never going to find a home. I think this is going to be more of like a pet project for people. But again, a 1-drop 9k giant Frankenstein robot. I mean, how do you not want to build around that?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head again. I think it's mainly going to be like a kind of a niche, kind of pet deck thing where you mess with it. And it might see a little bit of value in that deck, but I don't think you just auto-include this guy anywhere. I don't think competitively he's going to see too much play. But, I mean, I think you could have fun with it, for sure. And he's big enough for what he costs.
Yeah, you could terrorize local metas with this.
So the next one we have is the notorious
the most
Buckaboo.
talked about card.
Yeah, so 2 cost monster Buckaboo. When a character your opponent control, or when your opponent has a character enter the field, put Buckaboo in the break zone. If you do, your opponent discards 2 cards from their hand.
So the Boogaboo of Ice deck. This card is super, super strong early game. Late game, it kind of becomes a lot less useful. So there's a ton of trades on this. I mean, when you're looking at it, you play it turn 1 in a backup. They play a turn 1 backup and have to pay 6 for it. There's so many sides to this. I think the card's really good, and I think it's going to see a decent amount of play. I know a lot of people are teching around it and trying to build around it. It adds so much initial worry and math on how you're going to build out as an opponent against it. But at the same time, if you're drawing them late game, you're probably just might be pitching them, or you might just be hoping that they have to creatively look at their backups to tap to play around it. It has some interesting interactions, and I'll kind of let you talk about those, but I definitely think it's a really, really strong card, and there's so much hate for this card right now that I feel like I just want to jam 3 in there just to like have it be there for people to see.
Yeah, I think the bark is a bit more than the bite, honestly. So
it's the root beer.
So first off, a question that a lot of people ask: Yuna does not deal with this card.
Yep.
His payment is attempting to go to the break zone, not hitting the break zone. So, or like KOing him and attempting to put him there. So as long as he gets removed from the field during his effect, he will still go off.
Yeah.
So Yuna doesn't get around that. I think that he's a bit of a trap card. I don't think he's like you said, he's really good early. and not so good late. I just think Flan is a better value card for me. Like, I think if you're gonna go that build, I like Flans more, just because they only cost one. They search for themselves, and then you get that guaranteed discard. I do think where this card is a super blowout is if you play this guy early and your opponent mulligans into a hand where they're forced to play some kind of 3 or 4 cost backup turn one.
Oh yeah.
And that will feel really bad, like really bad. But there are ways to play around this, and the later the game goes when you play this, there's even more ways to play around it. So I think people will try it and then probably start to realize that it's not as good as they think it is. But I don't think it's bad. I just think that there are other cards that you would rather it be in your deck.
Yeah.
So the next card is 3 cost Mystic Knight, another standard unit for ice. When Mystic Knight attacks, you can cast 1 summon from your hand, and the cost required to cast the summon is reduced by 1, and it cannot become 0.
So, again, I think we're kind of getting those subtle hints that they want, and maybe they want standard units to be with like Ice Fire, because being able to attack with this and then Belias for 1, wow. Again, it's interesting. It's on curve, so it's it's going forward for that kind of value that you're getting out of it for the initial cost. But I definitely think this is kind of a shell that we haven't seen yet, and we haven't been able to flesh out really where it goes. I'm not sure where this fits in current builds that on cost that you want to play, but I definitely think it's going to be something that you're looking forward to in future sets of getting a lot more help in like a standard unit, low cost build deck.
Yeah, so I can say the first thing that comes to my mind is Water Ice and stacking this with Rare Yuna. Attacking with this and Cuckoo Lane for 2 or Leviathan for 1. That sounds pretty insane to me. Outside of that, it doesn't sound like it. I mean, a lot of the ice summons are pretty cheap anyways, so you're like just in an ice build, I don't think this is that great. But when you start venturing into those other summons that other colors have, I think is where it gets kind of gross. And I think the fact that it can stack with Yuna makes me want to play with something like that. Maybe run something with like gladiators and some stuff where there's recursion and play that Yuna and then just play like a big water summon package, and I'm just playing water summons for like super cheap.
For super cheap, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, not much more. I think the card is good. I think it could find a home in some decks. Competitively, I'm not sure yet. It depends on if those builds end up being like really good.
Yeah.
So the next card, this is the last card that's not a starter card, is Luge. So when he enters the field, you get to search for a card named Barnabas, and for 1 ice and dull, he can choose a forward and dull it or freeze it. And he's a 4-cost 5k.
So we kind of had talked about Barnabas earlier and said, it's kind of like a pet deck. He's good, but there's kind of some interactions that you got to play in. This is that. Again, he's an EX burst, so you can tutor up another card for a Barnabas, but again, then you're going to be wanting to find another Luge to make that Barnabas work. I do like the fact that you can pay 1 ice, tap and dull, or tap him and choose a forward, dull and freeze it. That's interesting. But the body is really, really weak for a 4-drop. And I don't know. I don't really see where you're wanting to put this in. I think again, it's kind of that pet deck. They wanted to have some interesting little interactions for like limited environments or for some like fun play around. But I don't think this is going to see a lot of competitive play. Interesting card though. I think it's kind of cool to have some other lines of sight into what you're playing.
Yeah, again, I think this only really sees play in that pet deck. Could be fun to play with, though. I really wish this guy cost 3. I think if he cost 3, it'd be really interesting. Like, even
it'd be worth.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, you're right. At 3, I think he's super worth it to definitely want to build around just because of what he can do. And, like, again, being able to tutor up some other big guys. So it's kind of interesting. But, yeah, I don't think this is ever going to be in some competitive play unless there's just some line that we're not seeing at all right now.
Yeah, again, I don't think he sees much play, but it could be like a cool deck to mess with. So the next card, we're getting into the starter cards, is 5-cost Sarah. She's an EX burst, 7k. When she enters the field, you can search for 1 job Moogle added to your hand, and when she attacks, activate all the Moogles you control. or job Moogle you control, and then she can discard one job Moogle to choose a forward and dull it.
So this is a really interesting card. Usually in the starters, you get that one card. This could actually see some competitive play. But again, it's kind of forcing you to want to play a multiple color Moogle deck. And again, right now, we kind of haven't seen a lot of that. The fact that when it attacks, you can activate all the Moogles you control. I didn't do a ton of research into all the forward Moogles that you could have, but like the backups, you can kind of some interesting synergies there. But again, it's a starter deck card. It's meant to be kind of put together in those packages to do some interesting things, but just kind of flesh it out. I don't think we've really seen what the Moogle deck can do, but I've heard some people talking online about this. It's pretty broken. I don't know if this is going to end up being a deck that's going to see a ton of competitive play, but I'm interested to kind of try to tinker around with it and build it and see what can come of it.
So I actually think that this deck will be a thing, but it's not going to be like the janky version. I think you will see this competitively, because I think in order for her to be worth it, I think you only really have to run two colors. Because you use this, you get your Mog 13, you play Mog 13, you get another 13 card. That's already a value train right there. Very similar to like Setzer. And then you can discard your extra Mog 13s to dull things, almost like a Shiva. If you maybe pair this, I think as long as you're playing like one other Moogle other than Mog 13, I think this card is worth it. So maybe like Ice Earth, where you're getting the new Mog Mobius.
The one that can give Brave?
No, the one that you pay to Earth and you KO it to search for any forward.
Oh yeah, to bring a forward back, yeah.
Yep, I think that could be good. I think with like maybe like Ice Water with like Horn could be good. I mean, I think there's a lot of ideas that I have with this, and I really think you only need to run 2 different Moogles that are good for this to be worth. And I think everything else would just make it even better. And the fact that it's a burst is also really nice too. So maybe like you play this in like Ice Water, you get this off the top, you search for your Mog 6, you search for your Horn, or Mog 13, then play Mog 13, get another one of this, player, get another Moogle. And it kind of like that Setzer-ish value train you get with 6, but with Moogles. I don't know if it's going to be as good as 6, however, but I do see that kind of similar line of play with this card. So I think that archetype might end up being pretty good. We'll see though. It's hard to say.
This could be the year. Moogles for 20.
So the next card is Mog 13 2. He's a 2-cost backup. He's a Moogle. He's dull. Choose one card named Sarah or Noel. It gains First Strike and Brave until end of turn.
Again, it's interesting. It's a 2-drop backup. It is a so you've kind of got some synergies there. Being that the Sarahs that we have right now are fairly underpowered, it's kind of interesting. It could be cool to kind of see it paired with the Opus 4 Sarah, where you can attack with it, maybe get through some early damage, and give it Brave to then tap and discard cards. I think that could kind of be interesting. The Null, I think the other Null, the Lightning Null, isn't great. It could get haste and then be braved. If you're kind of playing that, the new Null, the Fire Null, is interesting because you can recur that for 6 and then maybe able to tap and give it Brave or First Strike. So I mean, it's interesting. I'm not really sure where this fits in the long run though.
Yeah, I think my biggest issue and the first thing that just makes me say that this is a bad card is that the other Mog 13 2 is just so much better than this card.
Yeah, it's not searching for anything, so...
Yeah, the other guy is a tutor for 3, so I feel like it'll never, ever see play over that, and you're going to play this in the same deck you would play that in because you're playing 13 characters, and I think it's too narrow in use as far as it only hits those 2. So you're only playing this in probably, like you said, Ice Lightning with Null in it, which doesn't sound very good, or Ice Fire 13, which also... right now doesn't seem very good to me either. So I don't think this card sees play at all. I don't think it sees play at all, to be honest.
But it's a Panda Moogle, so I mean that's got to count for.
It does look like someone punched it in both eyes.
It's the redneck version of Moogles.
Yeah, so the last card, I think this card is pretty interesting actually, is 2 cost Yule. Um, she is pay 0. Look at the top card of your deck. You can only use this ability once per turn. When Yule is put from the field into the break zone, put the top 10 cards of your deck into your break zone.
So it's really interesting because we're getting a scry effect in Final Fantasy. Being able to look at the top card of your decks, you can kind of sequence, what you're going to be playing. So if you've got something where you want to tutor and it's not on the top of your deck, you don't necessarily want to do that, or you need to shuffle something away. This can be a super, super strong ability, and it's not costing you anything to do it. I think that's really, really powerful to kind of just be able to know what's coming up. And if you're going to be having some cards that are going to be able to draw some things, that's really, really powerful. And then the kind of the drawback to it, yes, that's a fairly steep cost to then have to, discard basically, or not discard, but remove the top 10 cards into the break zone. But if people are archering this, I think that's a win for you, because in ice, where you're going to be kind of looking for this, I think you'd rather want them, or they'd rather be archering Duke, or any other build that you're going to be looking at. They'd be looking for an Anthem to blow up, or maybe a Devout to blow up, or something like that, as opposed to just a 2-drop Scryer. So I think that kind of benefits you if they're having to waste removal on that. I definitely think it sees play at least as a one of. Just to be able to kind of tutor yourself in your deck and see what's coming. I really like this card, and I definitely think it's going to see a fair amount of play.
Yeah, I really like this as a one of. I think against Earth and Wind, a lot of times you might just end up pitching this just because you don't want to get rid of those 10 cards. But again, like you said, maybe you also might play this and bait them into trying to get rid of this instead of getting rid of your more like value backups like Duke Larg. And maybe that's worth 10 cards, but I think against a lot of times in those matchups, you're probably just gonna pitch this to play something else. But if you're not playing against those 2 colors, I think you just slam this thing down, and you're just basically you're looking at that card every turn, and you can use this on your turn and your opponent's turn. So you can use it once on your turn, once on your opponent's turn. If like somehow you're able to draw and you want to look again, which is really nice.
I think this card is just super broken. And again, if you played in like anything that you're going to be able to draw other cards, being able to kind of see what's on top is, I don't know, it's just super, super broken, and we haven't really seen anything like that. So I think it's interesting that they give it to.
Yeah, you would think this would go to water.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like a water card, which is interesting because I think they've done a melding of elements in this Opus 5 set. So it's kind of nice to be able to have an ability to kind of plan out your ice as opposed to just kind of like, well, we're going to get to top deck now, and am I hitting that Shiva? Because that's a lot of times what it gets down to. Now you can know that you're hitting that Shiva and kind of rest easy.
Yeah, I also like this to be like, maybe there's those times where like you really need a card and you don't know what's coming off the top of your deck and they're swinging at you and you don't know if you should block. Now you're just like, oh look, I don't want that card. I'll let it go through.
Yeah, can I worry about the EX burst here or not? So
yeah, so I think this card definitely sees play. I like it a lot as a one of in like mono ice decks, or even like some other decks like Earth or Ice, whatever. Yeah, so that's all the cards that we have today for Ice. Let us know if you agree with our ratings or how we feel about certain cards. And then just if you could like, favorite, subscribe, that would definitely help us a lot. Next time we'll be doing, I believe, Win. So look forward to those cards. Talk to you guys later.
See you guys.